The icon. The paranormal activities of a spy agency. Author, Ayed Hindi. Part 1. Prologue. In my research facility, I found a cache of documents in a hidden archive that was discarded in our storage department. The documents were labeled and stamped by the Bulgarian Secret Service. Hence, I was intrigued by the sheer amount of information they may contain and hold in that document mentioned previously, and I've started translating it in my spare time as I was keen on understanding what was happening during the dark days of the Bulgarian regime in Sofia. One of the files I picked up from this archive was holding many pictures and overly detailed details that drew my attention first while I was browsing the piles of documents, and then I decided that it would be the starting point in my foray into translating the aforementioned documents and uncovering some of the concealed secrets that could explain the period before the political changes that took place in 1989. Although I'm not a writer by profession, I tried my best to convert the documents into dramatized and sequenced events. Note: I've omitted some details, alternated the character names, and obscured the exact locations for security reasons, and as I have discovered, many who were involved and mentioned in the documents are still at large and living among us. Chapter 1. The Theft. The documents dated November 1988 are. Some of the translated pages are in Bulgarian. At early morning, after the call for prayers from a mosque neighboring, a convoy of security services arrived at an address in Extra Iosif Street, central Sofia. The officers went up towards the first-floor flat of the residential building. An old lady opened the door with her shaking hands, and after a brief introduction, she let the security service into the property. "Dear Mrs. Radka, you reported a theft of one of your belongings to the local police. To be specific, it was an icon from your living room, is that right?" asked the security officer. "Yes, sir," answered the lady with astonishment expressed in her facial gestures. "I understand your bewilderment at seeing the security services here for what can be described as a petty theft, but the circumstances you described in your report to the police draw our own attention as our colleges and the police passed on the relevant information you have provided regarding the theft. Still, we would like to hear the details firsthand from you, dear, and we would be satisfied if you explained the events that came to pass in your own words, as my comrade will write down your testimony. Can you please tell us what happened recently?" said the security officer. "I shall explain in details, sir," said the old lady, and continued, "I have the habit of walking every day in the morning towards the fountain central baths and filling bottles with water from there and bringing it back home. As you can see, I have many plants. Those plants are a joy in my lonely life after the death of my husband and the departure of my son from here. I water all of them using the same water I bring from that fountain, of course, after it cools down because, as you know, it's hot mineral water pouring out of the discharge pipe. I've been doing it for many years, and as I noticed, all plants seem happy and doing well like one big family." She sighed and continued her chronicles of events. "Recently I bought another plant and placed it on the windowsill in the living room, that one, the yucca plant, and I started watering it as usual as the other plants, though it does not need much wetting, just sprinkling few drops. I know it can grow a white flower, but I was shockingly surprised noticing the plant suddenly have started growing a small red fruit like an apple on the crown, and the soil was always very dry and needs constantly watering. Then I started adding even more water into the soil than regular. The apple-like fruit started growing in size, and then 10 days later, the fruit fell in the pot and stayed for the day. The next morning I saw the fruit was opened in half, but it was empty inside. Only the hard red shell remains, as you can see in the pot." She pointed at the yucca plant pot placed near the window. "After that day, strange things started all of a sudden appearing. On every morning when I came here into this room throughout the last week, I've observed with fear and shock that all icons hanged on the wall had been grubby by sort of mold or dark smearing dust, and the icons were slanted and tilted of their normal position. Later in the week, strange drawings in some kind of foreign letters or weird symbols started emerging, all of which occurred recently and affected all the icons except for one that remained always clean, tidy, and fixed in its own place, as you can see, sir. We have many icons, My late husband was collecting icons from wherever he traveled. He was a truck driver, and he used to travel and cross the whole country in his lorry and transport many types of goods. By the time he developed this hobby of collecting icons and labeling them according to the location of purchase, said Mrs. Radka, continuing after a brief pause. The whole of last week I had the irksome duties of cleaning the icons multiple times a day from mold and dirt, but that lasted only until yesterday when I came early in the morning. I've seen all icons were clean, untouched and shiny except for one which had vanished and disappeared. The one that remains clean during the week is gone. As you can see, sir, here is the empty place of that missing icon. Other than that, nothing is missing. Though I don't know much, but nothing else has gone, well, except for the icon, and there was no forced entry. Nothing was broken inside, and my apartment doors and windows were all remained properly locked. It is a very scary experience for me at the thought of someone was be able to breach my property unnoticed and steal something dear away from me. That's why I called the police yesterday and informed them about the mysterious theft, explained Mrs. Radka. Had anyone entered your property for the last 2 days except for us and the police, like guests, friends, or any workers or neighbors? Asked the security officer. No, no one came. I don't recall allowing anyone in here, sir. I live alone here since my late husband died more than 10 years ago, which coincided with my only son's departure from the place, and my rare contacts with the people around me are very limited. They are always changing. I mostly encounter young people who have moved and settled in this area, and my old friends unfortunately are either departing and relocating towards other places or joining God in heaven, said the old lady. Do you have a picture of the missing icon? Said the security officer. Yes, my husband was very proud of his exclusive collection, and he's always asking my son to take him a photo surrounded by the icons. I'll bring the photo boxes, and I'll show the icons, said the old lady, and went inside and called upon the security for help in lifting and moving the photo boxes. And then she picked one album from a box, opened it, and picked a photo. Sir, this is my husband standing beside the missing icon, said the old lady, passing the photo to the agent. Do you suspect anyone you know who was able to enter your place without your knowledge and rob the icon? Asked the security officer. No, I don't, answered the old lady with hesitation. All right, with your permission, I must take this photo and add it among other evidence in the file for a careful study, and we'll start our utmost efforts on finding your icon as we now have an image of what we're looking for. Also, my comrade will take the planet with the shell and hand it to our laboratory for more research, and we'll bring you a new planet as a replacement for this one. You'll remain in this place if you like. If you have any worries, please do tell, otherwise we may contact you in the near future for further inquiries, and if you can write down your son's address in case we may have to speak to him, and lastly, you'll get a simple financial gift as assistance to help you get over current events. It's from the government on the condition that not a word of what you've told us goes out to anyone else. Understood, my dear lady? Here is my phone number if you want to speak with me about any new thing you notice or remember. In the meantime, no one should know about what happened except for us, the security services. Have a good day, dear Mrs. Radka, stated the security officer. The security officers left Mrs. Radka's property with the plant with the fruit shell, and they marked the front door after their exit. They sat in their cars, and their assistant continued writing in the report when the head officer asked, Tell me, deputy, it's me or Mrs. Radka? Have gone crazy? Why would we investigate a missing icon? That's the order, sir, answered the deputy. Can you tell me what these icons are? Asked the officer in anger. Sir, it's an artificial image of dead people, replied the deputy. In spite of my warnings to Mrs. Radka, seeing the neighbors gazing at us from their windows and from the street like we're in a circus, I'm sure the rumors will spread around, and by the day end everyone has a different takeover of the missing icon. Definitely that's the intended purpose, inflating the story and creating a huge bubble out of nothingness. Hollowed heads are running the show. Tell me, deputy, what's left of your report? It's completed, answered the deputy. Shall we go now and hand over your report and the witness or evidence, I mean the yucca plant? Ordered the officer. Yes, sir, replied the deputy. Chapter 2. The Miracle. Deep down in South Bulgaria near the borders with Greece, a town called Zatova, inhabited by around a few thousand residents, lays deep in the Thracian valley that strides along the Rhodope Mountains. At noon one day in November 1988, an unusual event befell the village unexpectedly at the only main square where the villagers usually gather for selling and trading their own products. According to police reports, the square was buzzing with shoppers at that time of the day after traders had erected their stalls and filled it with fruit, vegetables, dry meat, dairy products, and honey. A middle-aged woman in her 30s came along into the main square pushing a wheelchair where her disabled son, about the age of 10, was sitting. She approached one of grocery stalls and started picking some fruit from the baskets. The grocery man in his late 50s started chatting with the lady and helped her out on picking the fruit. But suddenly he stopped talking and then he turned and went towards the wheelchair and stood in front of the sitting disabled child. He then extended his arms and pulled the child's hands off the chair and made the disabled child standing on his frail legs, and then the grocery man dropped his hands and left the child maintaining himself and continued standing firm on his own without assistance. The mother, seeing what just happened and how her son managed away from the wheelchair, she fainted and fell on the ground. A crowd of people standing nearby rushed immediately, helping the mother and watching attentively the child. It was an awe moment that marveled their souls like never before. They inquired diligently about what's the matter at hand and what they had just witnessed. Everyone was in shock and mystified in observing such an event that can occur once in lifetime. Then the grocery man woke up from his stupor and started asking what happened during his unconsciousness moments that came about upon him out of the blue. The crowd, bewildered and struck by the telling event, gathered in mass around the grocery man and began endlessly questioning him about what he had just done and urgently demanded an explanation for performing such a strange, powerful phenomenon. While the grocery man, still in daze and in disbelief, he managed to compose himself, and after uttering a few faltering, inaudible words, he answered with hesitation mixed with fear. "I heard an order. I must head toward the crippled child and pull his hands and make him to stand and then release my own hands after that," said the grocery man and continued. "It's firmly ingrained in my mind. The order was loudly ringing like a church bells and I couldn't resist or question that imminent call. I had performed what I was commanded to execute without any reluctance or reservation." Some of the villagers gathered in a mob and started gazing at that poor man in wonder, and many of them started touching his hands. Others demanded from him to baptize them at the church, but he pushed back. "Stop, I'm not a holy man, and I don't deserve to be. Please, I can't heal or bless any of you. I'm like you, an ordinary servant of God," shouted the grocery man. The police arrived upon hearing the eruption of events in the main square and saw the gathering of agitated people surrounding the grocery man. The police dreaded the situation could turn into an uproar and started promptly pushing them back from the scene and eventually inquired about the event. The healed child started walking slowly, but with difficulties, and was helped by a neighbor to bring him back home along with his mother, while the police escorted the grocery man out of the square to the police station nearby for further questioning. "You've performed some kind of magic or so-called miracle," said the police officer, and continued. "How were you able to perform such a thing? We know you very well. You've been in this village for more than a half-century and never heard of you being an extraordinary magician or a wizard. Can you explain what happened?" The disabled child stood and started walking, suddenly holding your hands. The child had been crippled since his birth. Everyone in the village knew about the child's health condition. "We're utterly puzzled at your actions," I asked the police officer. "I'll repeat it 100 times. I heard a voice ordering me to do what I've done. It's not me who performed the miracle. I was merely a tool holding the child's hands and executing higher orders," said the grocery man. "You've left us with no choice but to call the state security services and inform them about what occurred in this village. The people still gathered in large numbers at the square, and we won't be able to control them with our barely sufficient police force, as we likewise can't let you go out of here for your own safety, or else the mob will recommence harassing and hunting you at home or anywhere in the village or near. Beside, any kind of religious miracle or sorcery is not permitted in this country. As you know, we're ruled by a communist party. Religion is incompatible with our ideology. We cannot release you now until the special security arrives and they will take it from here," added the police officer. "Please, I need to see my wife and my children. I left my stall and my money out there," begged the grocery man. "Don't you worry, your market stall has been removed by the policeman attending there in the square, and your family has been informed and is also protected by us," answered the police officer. The security services arrived after hours of waiting at the police station in Zatova village, and after a succinct briefing from the police over the matters at hand, they went on to speak with the grocery man. The officer was furnished with comprehension of the challenges at hand in the village. They sat around a table, and the head of the security officer, surrounded by his agents, started explaining his views on the matter. "We heard your side of the event in agonizing details, though it's hard for us believing any of what happened, and we are in doubt of any miracle that can be materialized, especially through you after knowing who you are. I agree that it was no more than a mere coincidence, a natural occurrence in my view, and it must be your own instinct that influenced your rush towards the crippled child in time of him recovering and regaining his ability to walk. Of course, if he ever was in reality disabled, as I've been told since his birth, but in your random and impulsive abrupt actions, you have caused nonsense and clamor in this place, and moreover, the simple villagers started now believing there is such thing as an extraordinary event or miracle, and any sick people can be cured for just being touched by a mere stranger, and eventually, they may refuse any medical intervention for the sake of your holy touch, which is in fact an utter derisory and pathetic reasoning." The security officer stopped for a second and gathered his thoughts, then continued, "Therefore, the village don't need unsung hero living here and can perform a miracle upon request. You and your family will be removed and shall be deported into a place where no one can come in contact with you, in accordance with our government policy. Meanwhile, our doctors will initiate checks on the child's health and monitor his condition for further assessment and establishing the facts based on science. By the way, he will be also departing away from here alongside his family, and they will be relocated somewhere else. We must be sure there is no despicable conspiracy stitched together between you and the child's family in performing such an act of theatrical scene here in the village and causing disturbances that threatening the peace and sowed agitation among the crowd. For the sake of clarity, we'll educate the villagers of the current events, and it must be concluded within the right definition of what occurred in line with our party principles. But for you, the case will remain open until you feel shame and remorse of your own deeds, and then we might decide otherwise," said the security officer, and dispatched his agents to control the mob and lock the grocery man's property. Chapter 3. At the security headquarters. Zatova village was overwhelmed with shock and awe of what happened, the disappearance of 2 families in one day and the establishment of a security center out there, at the imposition of restrictions by security services upon the local residents and suffocating their daily life. The situation in the village didn't pass without challenge by the brave people living there. Encouraged by the blowing waves of changes that has already rocked the Eastern Bloc, and new ideas streamed throughout the population in search for freedom, and with the support of neighboring villagers, a series of skirmishes erupted with the police and dissent spread among other localities. The government needed to act fast and quell the potential uprising and take back control of that area with extreme force and might. Back in Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, at the state security headquarters, the recent events in Zatova village stirred the intelligence officers. As there were elevated suspicions that foreign agents from hostile countries wanted to interfere in Bulgaria and create disturbances to destabilize the government and undermine its authority to subvert their economic reforms, the head of state security decided to hold a meeting with his deputies where they could make sense of the latest developments. The boss sat discussing the security operations and the progress of identifying the collaborators in the unexpected violence that broke out and the tactile results with a few of his deputies. The latest report I received from Zatova village indicating that there is peace again and the local protest has diminished significantly in the latest days after our forces were able to apprehend the rebels' leaders and live beginning to normalize in the stricken area. The local police decided to ease the restrictions in the village as a sign of goodwill, but people start arriving from all of Bulgaria and other countries to witness the place of so-called miracle after that benevolent move of the police. Hence we may need to reimpose some of the measures again on the village, despite the bitter feelings of the residents, to prevent the place from turning into a religious pilgrimage hotspot though, despite being a commercially profitable business, and it's an opportunity to recruit some of the foreigners arriving there into our secret services, and with all of this on my mind. At the end it could constitute a threat to our security in the long term. What you think? I agree with you, sir, answered his assistant, and continued. Our officers, in search of any link prior to that so-called miracle between the families, have concluded their intensive interrogation, and we found out there was no hard evidence suggesting a collusion or any premeditated actions apparent between the both previously. The child was in fact crippled and unable to walk since his birth. And the grocery man was telling the truth and kept reaffirming the sequences of his actions with accuracy. Therefore, sir, we have left nothing to inquire in his case. You, sir, might decide his fate. I see, the boss answered while shaking his head. Then he turned to another assistant and asked him if he wanted to say something. Sir, if I may, there was a strange case last week occurred here in Sofia. I'm bringing it forward because of the similarities in names. I mean the name of the village, Zatova, sir. There was presumably an act of theft of an icon from a property in central Sofia. The icon was purchased by a man from the same village, Zatova, many years ago. What happened before the actual theft or the missing of the icon was unusual enough to justify sending the security officers to the property, and they took over the case from the local police. Sir, I brought the case file which include photos depicting the icon. The so-called miracle occurred in the village after the disappearance of the same icon by one day, and our officer from there informed us about the huge interest from the public in this specific icon. I want to read the case file first. He started reading carefully the report, and after a few minutes, the boss turned to the assistant and asked, I can understand your point. You think the icon has been returned to the original village, and then started this episode of extraordinary events, and you suggest there is an actor or actors behind the events. Yes, sir, I think there is a connection between the two events that came about simultaneously and stirred public sentiment. The assistant answered the boss. You need to find the icon and the alleged actors behind the theft, affirmed the boss and proceeded. This is an order to all the security units. Our country is currently under propaganda attack, and there are many hotspots that need to be dealt with simultaneously. We have a network of priests around the country and outside. Use it to track the suspicious actors and the harmful rumors. Test their faith not for the church but for our regime. The boss took a deep breath and continued his direct instructions. Agent S, you have all the details and you will be the head of the operation and you'll report back to me. You need to print the image of the icon and hand it over to your agents so they know what they are looking for and find out the thief and the recipient of the icon, and lastly inspect any connection that might emerge during the search that links hostile forces and their vassals, as they might exert influence upon the public and complicate our mission. I think, Zatova village is a very good starting point of your search, but you will not be restricted to it as the icon might still be hidden somewhere here in Sofia. My instructions could not be clearer and you know what your target is. Let me remind you, this is a high-priority security mission. Any attempt of dissent by the people objecting our collective efforts to bring the icon should be smothered. The boss concluded his orders and dispatched his deputies on a secret conquest mission. Chapter 4. The Priest. In accordance with the new decree issued by the intelligence boss, the newly appointed head of operations, Agent S from the Bulgarian State Security, arrived at Zatova village early in the day. He was accompanied by his deputies, and they went directly towards the new security post established at the former property of the grocery man. After meeting and reading the daily reports and updating everyone with the latest developments, Agent S left the post and walked towards the only church in the village with his deputy. Father Kirill, I'm Agent S from the State Security Headquarters. I would like to ask you a few questions regarding the events that occurred in your village. All right, but I've sent my report to your colleagues this week, answered Father Kirill. I've seen it. There's nothing much in it. My inquiry is about a different matter, if you may, replied Agent S. You may proceed, noted Father Kirill. The agent pulled the photo from a file, handed it to the priest, and asked, Have you seen this icon and the man standing next to it? Asked Agent S. The man? No, I can't remember seeing him before here in the village, but the icon, yes, for sure, because it was on our property, retorted Father Kirill. Tell me then, what happened to that icon? Inquired Agent S. Simply disappeared, vanished. It was hanged on that corner of the church among other icons. We had maintenance work at the interior walls of the church as we needed to paint and redecorate the church from inside to remove the dark patches caused by the candles, among other things. The icons were displaced in the churchyard while the painters were at work. Once the work finished, we brought back in the icons, but we noticed the missing icon, answered Father Kirill. What time frame are we talking about, to be specific? Asked Agent S. Around 15 years ago, plus or minus a few months, said Father Kirill. Did you report it? I mean the missing icon, questioned Agent S. Yes, but only to my bishop. It was a very embarrassing incident as the icon stayed for only 1 month in our church after being dispatched from the bishop's house in Sofia. We didn't know for sure if it was stolen or just disposed of among other metal scraps and unintentionally ended up in a random junkyard, for it was heavy and of some sort of metal, but the bishop was very upset and angry at that time. God bless him. He wanted dearly to banish me from the church for negligence and lack of judgment unless your people, I mean the security services, advised against it, as the cause wasn't good enough to warrant such a move, and as you can see, I'm still here, though just a priest, answered Father Kirill. Can you, Father Kirill, tell anything about the icon itself? Its origin, the material it's made of, and what it represents? As you've noticed from the only photo we have, it's blurry and dark, requested Agent S. As I mentioned before, we've received it from Sofia Eparchy, Diocese, and the Bishop of Sofia sent it to our church on a rotation basis, and after 6 months, it would be sent to another church. As I understood from the bishop letter written at the time of the recipient, we were the first church in the scheme, starting the rotation pilot of that specific icon, which he briefly mentioned as a gift towards the whole Bulgarian churches. The icon itself was heavy compared to other icons, probably made of certain metal, but I'm not sure, retorted Father Kirill. In that short period of time the icon spent on that corner, did you notice any unusual things taking place here or in the village? Asked Agent S. 2 events I can clearly remember. During that period of time we called extra volunteers for help cleaning the other icons every day because of strange smearing. A dark matter appears on every other icon, and that occurrence promoted the call on painting the church walls as we thought we had mold spread into the building. The other thing was the sudden healing of woman from her incurable disease. That person was stranger, not native from the village. I spoke with her as she came here thanking us and donated money towards the church, and she claimed after her first Satova visit and attending this church by mere chance, she prayed in front of the icons, and then when she got back to Sofia and checked herself into the hospital, they told her that the terminal disease has vanished from her body, replied Father Kirill. You didn't mention those events in your reports. I've recited all of your files. Not a single word was written in there, asked Agent S. No, I couldn't be sure if what she had told me was truthful, as I have no means or even documents she would have provided, nor was her alleged healing just a coincidence. Besides, I couldn't be sure or ascertain which icon she meant by healing. She was ambiguous and never mentioned a specific icon, answered Father Kirill. Do you know the woman's name, address, or anything about her? Inquired Agent S. No, sorry, she was a stranger. She only mentioned she came from Sofia, the capital. I thought that's her place of residency, replied Father Kirill. Then I have to go back to Sofia and check for all hospital records around 15 years ago or about for any recorded sudden healing of a very sick woman. That would be a huge task. Thank you, Father Kirill. I'm sure we'll meet again. In the meantime, goodbye, answered Agent S. And he left the church wondering how he could achieve such a feat out of sketchy information provided by the priest. And what if the priest knew more but abstained from revealing? Chapter 5. The Caves. On early Sunday morning, a group of hikers were venturing around the outskirts of Zatova village at that same time where the village was under siege from the security services. The group was guided by a local expert in the area from the same village. He dared the restrictions and decided to lead the hiker group for a small amount of money. He started by greeting them, explaining the route and the weather conditions in the area as they may vary depending on the heights that they can reach, and then he took them to the mentioned route where they can climb the mountain from the southern slopes towards the apex at a height of 1,200 m above sea level. While on their way up, the group stopped for a rest, and the guide gave them a short introduction to the area. From here, you can see down there my lovely village laid peacefully in that vast valley that spans between the beautiful surrounding Rhodope Mountains. This place has been inhabited for many millennia, and there are many archaeological sites scattered around us. Hence, the area has always attracted adventurers, whose sole interest is the precious artifacts and the abounding evidence of many past civilizations that occupied this place before for its fertile land, the excess of available water, and its great proximity near the trading routes. I hope you'll enjoy the experience. After that brief rest, the group continued their walk through tight, rigid passages for hours. The weather was sunny and quiet, but combined with a lower temperature, they were able to reach midway through their destination in their journey towards the top, and they decided on having a rest on a plateau stretch that created a crossing point between a variety of routes in different directions. One of the group participants noticed a strange formation on a lower part of the mountain not far from where they were resting from walking. "What are these caves in that mountain?" asked one of the hiking groups. "These are man-made holes that look like cave dwellings, clustered like a honeycomb in elliptical formations. There are speculations about their purpose, but the legend says it's a burial site where the ancient people interred their dead people," replied the guide man, and he resumed his explanation. "Yet we don't know that for sure as the place is very old and extremely frail, thus many parts of the caves lacking resistance and may fail under heavy pressure during explorations as well as of the repeated occurrence of earthquakes and tremors in this area and the surroundings cause the stones start crumbling down from the ceilings, the floors of these caves became unstable and precarious. Many tried venturing inside the caves searching for any hidden treasures but they ended up injured because of that falling debris. One fellow adventurer described inside the cave as a walk with the tottering walls mixed with horrible smell and acute lack of oxygen. Consequently, the people stopped trying conquering this part as many others believe the place somehow is cursed and off limits. "Who the people were living around here?" asked another one from the group. The common knowledge of our archaeologists agreed on the fact that the inhabitants here were the Thracian people, but there is no concrete evidence supporting such a belief. Though we've found a prehistory network of tunnels dug under the mountain not far from here, and those tunnels were used for mining minerals and performing rituals, they're well connected and prepared. We think that the tunnels most likely have access through these caves, but it's too dangerous to venture," replied to the guide. "Can I try to climb up there?" asked one participant. "At your own risk. As you can see, we don't have any equipment for such a type of climbing. We've been prepared for hiking only. If something goes wrong for any unforeseen reason, unfortunately, I won't be able to help you," answered the guide. "I won't go inside and breach the caves. I would only try peeking and having a glimpse through that hole using my light torch," requested the participant. "If you can climb over that tight ridge and walk cautiously, you will be able to reach some of the caves," answered the guide. The young man climbed on his friend's shoulders and clasped the sharp end of the ridge with his hands, then pulled himself up and jumped over the ridge. He walked slowly towards the cluster of caves and started inspecting the caves one by one from the outside, then stopped at one of the caves and shouted, "There is an imminent ray of light inside one of the caves. a glowing beam of lights. It's a faint ray streaming from a metal or a box and having enough energy to send illumination inside the cave like a small lantern. Is anyone in there? Yelled the young man. Please don't shout. The echoes of your sound can cause vibration, and the caves might collapse. Please come down and let us continue our hiking journey. We're running out of time, said the guide. The young man went down from the caves hurriedly and joined the group who were ready, and they began walking towards their destination. They kept chattering about the caves and what they had just discovered inside one of them. In the evening, the group returned back toward their base after completing the planned hiking journey. They thanked the guide man for his professional guidance and broad knowledge of the area, which in turn greeted them, and he went back towards his place in Zatova village. But before heading into his home, the guide man went first, reporting himself in the state security post, and gave them a detailed account of what happened today, including the names, ages, and nationalities of the group participants, and what they had encountered throughout the day journey. After all, it was the duty of the people of the village to report any extraordinary matter that happened there. End of Part 1.